Father, we just come before you and give you thanks for the privilege we have to sit around these tables and deliberate on important future issues in our community. And we just ask for wisdom and clarity as we make our decisions today. We ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors, and welcome along to 2022. As far as council meetings go, we have one apology today, and that is Councillor Doug Grant. Would somebody like to move that apology be sustained? Thank you, Councillor McDonnell. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Phillips. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. So, councillors, is there any declarations of conflicts with what's on the agenda this afternoon? There's not. Thank you. So we'll move on to confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting of council. And would somebody like to move that the meeting held in the council chambers on the meeting of the council held on the 14th of December be seen as a true and correct record? Councillor Highstead, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor McPhail, thank you. Are there any items that require correction? There's not. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. So, urgent late business. Is there any urgent late business that needs to be transacted today? There's not. Thank you. And
recording in progress.
Okay. So that brings us on to item 5, and it's my pleasure to welcome Ricky from Hokanui Runanga along to meet with us today and to share with us some of the values, expectations and aspirations that the Runanga has in the environmental space. So Ricky, you have somebody with you as well on Zoom, is that right? Yeah. Right. And welcome along, Courtney. She can hear me. Can you hear me, Courtney? Okay. You're on mute, Courtney, sorry. You're right now.
I can hear you fine, but I've got no visuals.
Okay. Well, that's probably a bonus. We're working on that. Is that camera? Does that help?
Oh, there you go.
Your turn. Yourself. Yeah. Right. Get out of there. Technology, eh? Righto, so welcome Ricky and Courtney. It's great to have you with us today, and we also have Matt sitting in from the planning group. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou. Ko toi mai nei ki te tautoko te kaupapa o tēnei rā. Tēnā koe e te rangatira o Murowai, Tracy Hicks. And tēnā koutou I a koutou I te rangatira. So kia ora koutou. My name's Ricky Parata. I'm the environmental lead up at the Hokanui Runanga. I'm here today with one of my colleagues, Courtney Bennett from Kitty Consulting. So I guess for a start, I'll give you a quick overview of why we're here today and what we're presenting. This is an accumulation of the relationship that was formed many years ago between the council and the Hokanui Runanga, and it's also the accumulation of that treaty partnership that we are on the journey together with. And over the last couple of years, you may have noticed that we've been a lot more active in the environmental area, or te taio. And as part of that, we, with the assistance of Kiti Consulting and Kauati, which is Elsa Kane, who some of you might be familiar with, have produced a document for the Gore District Council, which we'll be presenting here today. Now, this document comes from our executive board at the Hokanui Raunanga. It comes from the whānau as well who have had input, and it also comes from the kaimahi or the staff up there as well. So we really wanted to put down in the document who we are and why we're so active in the tile space, and why it's important to, as councillors, to interact with iwi and with Ngaitahu and with the Hokanui Raunanga and who we are up there. We had to edit a lot of it because a lot of it was pretty raw from our membership. So what we have done is put it in a nicely collated way for you to read. It's not very big, but it gives a good base, not only for the council, but for the Raunanga. So we're all on the same page. We all know the aspirations of the Raunanga, and we all know kind of where we're coming from in this space. So I'll quickly go through it. I won't go through it in detail, but it'll just be good. I hope everyone's got a copy. Mm-hmm. We did print out copies for everybody, but unfortunately we had problems with the printer. But what you have in front of you, the PDF version, it should be all legit. It was only when we printed it on hard copy. So Te Kawa o Te Taio, that's what we're calling it, and it is really about our values, our aspirations and our expectations. I really want you to focus on the expectations part of it, for what we do expect for our area. And just an acknowledgement again to Kauati and Kiti Consulting. I think you're very fortunate to be in a position as a council to be able to receive a document that can be used not only in the tile space, but in a lot of that resource management area that you're probably also familiar with. And it really gives good context to building upon and going forward. So at the beginning, this is our whakapapa or our pepeha, just about the Hokanui Raunanga. But at the front, after the contents, it goes on about our tohu or our symbolism for the Hokanui Raunanga. It's a representative of our landscape. Our kōruru is our tipuna, which is Tūti Mākohu, who was Kati Mamoi chief who lived in the Hokanui Hills. He lived out at Ōtaupiri, or Taupiri Gorge. That was one of the last remaining pa out at the Hokanui Hills. So that's that face that represents our tupuna there. It's got the maihi, which are the arms overlapping the green taniwha, which is matamata, which we also call haumuri, Croydon Bush. There's an awesome legend of matamata in the taniwha, which most of you are probably familiar with. If you ever want to know more, just let us know. We'll be more than welcome to come and tell our pūraka or our stories of that area. It goes on to Tangaroa, which is the deity of the sea, but also comes into that freshwater space, which is very important to us. You'll see the two kanakana represented here, which represents our falls, our Matera falls, where our food resource of kanakana still remains. And then the two koru down the bottom is for the Mataura, which is the Clutha River, and the Mata'au, sorry, which is the Clutha, and the Mataura, which is the Matota. So just down here, what this document represents, it really pulls into all the documents that have been produced so far around resource management. A big one is Te Tangi a Tauira, which is the iwi management plan, which encapsulates all of Murihuku and all the four Runaka. And it also represents the other documents, which is the Charter of Understanding, which we all signed, which the majority of you were there for last year. And then just a few Ngāi Tahu narratives around our stance on freshwater and our resource management. Hopefully you're all familiar with who we are, but there's a great explanation here of who the Hokanui Runanga is and how we got established and who we are as part of Ngāi Tahu, and also a little bit of history around the other Papatipu Runanga. I'll let you all read that in your own time. And then it goes on to a little bit of that history that I was talking about with our Kati Mamoi chiefs in here as well. So a good bit of history there for everybody. The values in here, they are quite generic values, and they are from generic in Ngāi Tahu, but we've also made them quite specific to the Hokanui Runanga as well. So these values are what we go off in all of our everyday aspirations, but also in our documentation and our resource management. Every time we go into a consent or to a hearing or anything to do with resource management, these values is what we draw upon. So if any of you want to get familiar in that world, that this is what we pull upon, and it has excellent meanings in here as well. So I think it'll be very helpful for any documentation going forward. We always get a lot of questions around mahinga kai and whatnot, so it's a very, very useful resource. We go into our interests of the area, Kiutaki Tai, which means from the mountain to the sea. So we go into our wai, or our water. Beautiful picture there of the old Matera Falls. And then we also go into a bit more detail around mahinga kai, whenua, mana whenua, which comes up a lot as well, ahika and the likes. So a great resource for council to pull upon, and also for us as Hokanui, because this is what we do use as a foundation document. Heading to the back, I'm going to pass this over to Courtney Bennett, because part of her research was this back end, and it's something that not only we've adapted, but a lot of the Ngāi Tahu Papatipu Runanga have adapted as well. And it really goes into the collaboration between iwi and Crown and local government and iwi as well. So I'll let you take over and talk to this, Courtney.
Kapai, thank you. Yeah, that's what Ricky said is exactly right. So our idea behind putting this document together was to create a reference place for both ourselves as kaimahi or employees of the Runanga working in environmental space, but also for the wider community and our treaty partners here at the council, so that we all know what we're talking about. We will have a shared understanding of what specific values mean in a Hokanui context, what our priorities areas are, all those kind of things. Yeah, just so that we all have that really shared understanding. The section at the back, expectations for Hokanui Runanga involvement in environmental management. There's been a lot of research that's gone on in different areas by different people that have talked about the way that engagement between Crown and Council and mana whenua is a bit of a minefield. Usually you've got parties that both want to do the right thing, they both have the same goals, but they're just not quite sure how to communicate those things to each other. So we thought it would be useful to include some best practice engagement strategies in this document. And after popping them in here, Hokanui has endorsed this to be the way that they would like to be engaged with going forward. So if we go to page 16, there's a clear diagram here that talks about what are the physical, practical on the ground things that people can do to ensure that they're engaging in a best practice way. So that's around proactive research, early and ongoing engagement, resourcing, mana whenua has got a quick rundown of what each of those mean in practice. So we just really encourage anyone who's engaging with hokonui runanga to have a quick look through this first and see how they can embody these key focused areas and themes of best practice engagement when deciding how they want to come and speak to the runanga. So I'll throw it back to you, Ricky.
Kia ora, ka pai, Courtney. So that's basically it in a nutshell. So more than happy to answer any questions. I hope there is a few, but this is really a reflection of where we're at so far in terms of our relationship together. We've had our ups and downs, as we all probably do in relationships, but you know, this is just us working with the council to hopefully make things more efficient in processes, but also in terms of that engagement and partnership as well. So, kia ora koutou.
Yeah, kia ora, Ricky, and I just want to say thank you for the proactive stance you've taken here by putting this before us as we begin on our journey around engagement and understanding and working together in a much stronger way than possibly we have in the past. I think it's very clear and concise, and I think we can all learn a lot from that. I also am very appreciative of the offer you make to be available for any questions that I or councillors or staff might have about just the processes, because I think sometimes we sort of stand back and don't ask, but we won't learn if we don't ask. So thank you for that. I'm just going to open it up for any councillors who may want to make any comment or ask any questions of either Ricky or Courtney. But I think it's pretty clear, and it's going to be a very useful tool for us going forward from here. So councillors, the floor is yours if you have any comments you wish to make. Councillor Dixon?
Thank you, Worship. I think it's a very clear, concise document.
Sorry, Councillor Dixon, can you just put your microphone on, please? Speak up.
It's not going today. Thank you, Worship. It's a very clear document and well set out, and I imagine that this will feed into our district plan, Ricky. It'll be very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And the sole, or not the sole purpose, but a good contributing factor was this district planning process, and how could we not only ourselves have a good platform to refer back to and move forward, but also to show the council where we're getting that information from and how we're building from it. So it's really a sharing document there. I'll pass it up to anybody on the Zoom if they want to speak to the contribution of this document to the district plan.
Yeah, I'll take that on. So a lot of the text from the draft of this document has already fed into sections of the district plan. And those of you that are on the district plan subcommittee, when you're reading through the values and expectations, none of those will sound new to you because it's all the things that we've been saying and discussing, but we've just decided to pop it all in one place so that we can make sure that as a runanga we're being consistent, because we're all literally reading off the same sheet.
Great. Councillors, any thoughts, comments? No? Everybody's clear? Thank you. Okay, look, thank you, Ricky, and thank you, Courtney, for your contribution today, and we look forward to continuing the journey. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou.
Okay, we'll move on then to item 6, which is urban environment assessment, and we have a report from our planning consultant, and Matt's here to speak to that. I think, Matt, do you want to speak to that now?
Yes, through the Mayor, yeah, I'm happy to do that. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Hill. I'm a principal planner at the Property Group. I'll just give you a quick rundown of the paper. Basically, the paper outlines that Gore District qualifies as an urban environment under the new National Policy Statement Urban Development because you have a combined housing and labour market of at least 10,000 people. This has been confirmed through discussions with the Ministry for the Environment. The paper outlines the implications for Gore. Particularly, there's a requirement to remove minimum parking standards, monitor housing, business supply and demand, and potentially become eligible for additional central government funding, as well as elevating the importance of the Gore area, both regionally and nationally. The paper goes through this in detail, so I'm not going to run through that. The paper recommends that Council confirm Gore as an urban environment, remove some parking standards, and undertakes the required monitoring work to support classification as an urban environment. So, through the Mayor, as I said, happy to answer questions if you've got any questions on the detail of the paper. So, over to you.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, councillors, the floor is open for any questions or comments. Councillor Hosted.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. I've just got a question regarding the inclusion of Matera but the exclusion of Mandeville, Waikaka and Pukereo. What's the logic around that? And also, in that explanation, any implications of bringing Matera in?
Through the Mayor, basically the reason Matera has been included is because it's more urban in nature than the smaller settlements. And in terms of implications, they're kind of set out in the paper. They largely focus on Gore, but the same applies to Matera. So removing the minimum parking standards. So if a developer is providing parking, they still need to design that parking to council standards. So, you know, the minimum dimensions for parking spaces and those sorts of things. So it's just removing the requirement for them to provide the minimum parking standards in the district plan. So, for example, if it's a residential development, it's one park per dwelling, or 2 parks where that dwelling's over 100 square metres.
So,
I hope that answered the question.
or possibly, so the other implications that you outline in your report regarding council monitoring and having to take into account, they apply regardless of whether we approve of a classification as an urban environment, or does that occur when that happens?
So the monitoring of things like housing supply and demand are a requirement once you're classified as an urban environment. The property group has been doing that work anyway to support the development of the district plan. So it would just be a continuation of that work in terms of monitoring. I've also talked about the good idea to keep monitoring the demand for parking as we move forward. So if there are any actions council needs to take in terms of providing on-street parking, then we can factor that in the future.
Just one last thing from me. The recommendation, the second paragraph, asks us to prove that Gore be classified. Should that be Gore and Matera, or was that recommendation correct the way I read it?
Yeah, I guess it should be Gore and Matera.
Good spotting. Okay, any other questions or comments from councillors? Quite a big shift in what we've been doing for a number of years around parking requirements, so personally a step in the right direction in my view. If there's no further comments. I'll ask from a mover.
No, I've got a question.
Okay.
Sometimes it's difficult for businesses to find space to provide parking, and so there's been a financial contribution. But it still doesn't solve the issue that some people would say there's never enough parking. So what do we do about that? You know, do we have a dedicated area where council's responsible to provide parking? And if council's responsible to provide parking, that means the ratepayer pays. So I can see us heading down that direction. We want businesses. We don't want to make it difficult for businesses to establish. Of course, if businesses establish and they haven't got any way of getting people to that business, there's a little bit of a problem.
That's right.
I've got no solutions. It's an
That's
easy
right.
question to ask. I'm just interested in what other people might have to say as they consider that.
Yeah, no, look, you raised some good points, but I don't have an answer. I'm not sure whether any other councillors have an answer or the Chief Executive has an answer to that particular quandary. I guess there is going to be a responsibility for council to make sure that the requirements of our community are being met, and parking just fits into that as well. So, and obviously there will be some cost, and as with everything that council does, it comes down to the ratepayer meeting that bill.
Your Worship, there's a couple of observations I could make. One is that these provisions have in the past proved to be quite a problem in trying to facilitate new development, where you've got to provide a minimum amount of parks, and sometimes there has been, dare I say it, incredibly lateral and creative interpretations to try and get something over the line where parks some distance from the establishment have been designated as being that will suffice to service that establishment. Which brings me, I guess, to the next point, which is that there may need to be just a little bit of recalibration in people's minds, particularly in, say, Gore, about that you might have to walk 100 metres or so before you get to your venue of choice. It seems to me that a lot of people have a very deep-seated expectation that they'll be able to drive their car and be within a handful of steps of their chosen business premises. But you wouldn't actually have that expectation if you visited a larger centre, say further north of here, a la Dunedin. So that's one way, because when you look around the CBD and the outlying periphery, there is actually an abundance of parks. It just means you have to walk a little bit further than perhaps you would normally desire.
Brew and Mayor, if I could just add to that as well, the last recommendation talks about directing council officers to commence monitoring parking demand, and so that's a way of working out on an ongoing basis whether there is enough on-street parking and whether council needs to intervene in that. So there's an opportunity to, through this recommendation, to ensure there's enough on-street parking to address any issues.
Okay. Right, Councillor Dixon.
Through Your Worship, I was just wondering, is there any funding available to carry out the survey, or is it just another cost to our ratepayers from central government?
I suspect the latter. Okay, so if there's no further questions, we have one small addition. That's adding Matera after Gore in first recommendation or second recommendation. Somebody like to move that the recommendations be confirmed? Councillor McDonnell, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Reid, thank you. Is there any discussion? There's not. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. No, from Councillor Bolger.
Just because I didn't get a sufficient answer to my question.
Just because you could. Yeah.
I don't recall my recording.
Righto, we'll move on then to item 7, which is cemetery bylaw, and we have a memo from Parks and Recreation Manager Keith. Keith, do you want to introduce this to us before we open for discussion?
Yeah, I will. Just the bylaw and the Cemeteries Handbook, most of it is around change of wording and change of style. The original bylaw goes back to 2008 and it was amended in 2017. The wording and the layout in the original document, I would say, was probably quite old-fashioned. So did a bit of an investigation looking at a number of councils, including Central Otago District Council, Invercargill City, Queenstown Lakes, Waitaki District and Clutha District. So I guess the resulting document for the bylaw, I believe, flows better. There's a bit of stuff in there about just around wording. The original bylaw talked about a cemetery manager. Gore District Council never had such a position, so it might have been trying to elevate the role of a sexton, but yeah, I think we're probably trying to be more consistent now. So, you know, we talk about a sexton, a sexton's assistant, and a cemetery administration officer. So that I think they're probably all terms that people are quite comfortable with. The other thing, the original bylaw talked about cremation, and again, council's never had a crematoria, so I don't think I'm remiss in removing that from the document, really. So it doesn't have any impact on the way we run the cemeteries. In terms of the Cemeteries Handbook, the old document was called an Operations Policies and Procedures, and I think that's probably a number of councils have gone to the handbook wording, and that's essentially the handbook is really the day-to-day document that the council staff would be referring to. I guess there's probably 3 or 4 changes that are probably significant in there. One is around the hours of operation. The current document talks about 6 days a week operation, 9 till 4. The new document, I have just made a change with talked about summer hours and winter hours, and the summer hours 9 to 4, so unchanged, and then the winter hours I've said 9 till 3:30, and I guess that's primarily around health and safety. You know, I kind of was a bit dismayed when the sexton's actually still working at 7 o'clock in the dark in the middle of winter, and I think it's probably that change is consistent with a number of other southern councils. So you know, I don't think it's unreasonable. I did also make a change at Saturday 9 till 1, but I actually realise that's an error. That was based around cost recovery. I didn't believe we were recovering costs, so Saturday should actually remain 9 till 4. So the other thing in there is there's additional clauses. One is around special procedures for Maori burials. We didn't have that covered at all in the previous document, and the other one it was around religious denominational burials. Again, we didn't have it covered previously, and one in particular is we have a Muslim burial beam at Pukerau Cemetery, and that is now accommodated in that document. So that's all the comments I need to make.
Thank you, Keith. So effectively bringing us into the 2020s in terms of terminology and style. Steve, do you want to make any comment before I open it for discussion? Okay, I think it's fairly straightforward, but open for discussion by councillors now. So, Councillor Hosted.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Just through you, and maybe I tried to read it all, but the plot next door was generally available for purchase, is my understanding in the previous policy. So your family could buy the adjoining plot. I couldn't find that in this policy. Is that something that I've missed? That's moved on, or did that not exist?
I'm just not sure that is right. Keith, do you want to make a comment there?
Yeah, certainly not the intent. You know, that's a recognised procedure for most councils in New Zealand. So yeah.
If you could just check that. The other question I had is under 3.5, and it's probably out of our existing policy. It says that the council, this is on page 35, that we wouldn't buy an unused plot. It would seem that cemeteries are extremely short in supply, especially some of the older cemeteries. So if a plot did come back to council, I couldn't see any harm in that. Why would we exclude ourselves from repurchasing a previously sold plot? It doesn't make sense to me.
I believe that's something that goes as part of the Cemeteries and Burials Act, and I think the council previously had it was something around after 60 years, the ownership of the plot becomes available. So yeah, I probably just need to check that. Actually.
Yeah, it's actually the one below that. Yeah, it's just simply if someone buys a plot and they wish to sell it, they can transfer it to someone else, but not the council, which we worth having a check.
Okay, so this is going out for consultation now, isn't it? So, yeah, I'm sure we'll get some comments around those. Yeah.
What if we don't, Your Worship? What's the procedure if we don't get feedback? Can councillors make changes now, subject to guidance from the staff, before those changes are made, before it goes out?
Do you want to make a comment on that one, Steve?
Are you asking, can you make changes now? Absolutely. This is a proposal for consultation. If you think there are some amendments required, this is your chance to suggest those amendments. And and I probably would, if the amendments are substantial or need some wordsmithing, I would suggest that we bring it back a revised or refined draft for approval to publicly notify at the next meeting. If it's straightforward, we can do it on the fly tonight.
So I guess what you're suggesting, Brett, is that the bottom line be deleted from that bylaw. Okay.
No, I'm suggesting that it's in the handbook, I think, that there's absolute clarity given that family can buy a plot next door to, in the event of a death.
I guess what I'm looking at is 3.5.
And 3.5, that final sentence, but it's subject to the mood of the rest of the council. That would be my intent.
Yeah, no, just before we open it up for further discussion. Look, I think Councillor Heisey has raised a good point here, and I'm keen to hear from other councillors on this issue. Councillor Bolger?
Just another question, or seeking some clarity. Clause 3.6, pre-purchase. Council does not pre-sell any of the exclusive burial rights. The exclusive burial rights can only be purchased at the time of interment. Okay, that's fine. So how does someone reserve the adjacent plot? How's that managed? Really? Okay, same thing.
So, Steve, do you want to make a comment?
Your Worship, yeah, I think I'd like to think about this a bit further, because if you go down that track, you can have a lot of empty holes in your cemetery for sometimes decades, and then you've got burials being effected between two existing graves, and that presents an increased element of danger. So I just think before we say yes or no, I'd like to just get have some time to think about that, and perhaps also defer to what some of our neighbours allow or don't allow. So there's always that urge if I want to have a plot, but increasingly there's use of one plot and two people within it. So a husband and wife, for example, can be buried together. But whether the intention is to allow, or what the pros and cons are of cemetery management, of allowing a family to preserve an adjacent plot that may not be used for many years, that's the type of thing I think we need to get some advice on, and so that we are quite, excuse the pun, sure of our ground as to how we approach this matter.
Okay.
I recall we worked through this, and that's where we got to one plot, but I stand to be corrected, and I guess it's another point to make. It would be very useful to have a marked up copy of a previous policy so that we can see what in fact we are changing, rather than trying to take it as a new policy.
Okay, Councillor
Yeah, I
Gardner.
think the Wakeka ones only allow you to have, not to pre-purchase. They don't. I think it's the reason Steve gave. Yeah.
Okay, Keith, did you want to make any further comment at all at this point?
I believe the wording actually does allow for a family member to, at the time of internment, to purchase the plot next door. So I believe that wording covers that. So they at the time of interment, they either purchase a double depth, which accommodates the partner or other family member, or they have the option of the plot next door. So. Yeah, so I believe that's covered, yeah.
Okay. So are we comfortable with that? Yeah, Councillor Gardner?
There's just the timing will need changed in the booklet for Saturday. That'll be changed before it goes out, yeah.
Okay, look, thank you for those points, and it's it's good to get them clarified before we go any further down this particular track. But we do have a recommendation, and if there's no further questions or comments from councillors, I'll ask if someone would approve or move the two recommendations relating to this issue. Councillor Dixon, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor McDonnell, thank you. Any further questions or comments? There's not. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. So this will now proceed to consultation and will come back before us again in due course. Right, so that brings us to item 8. And again, more public consultation on the draft Gore District Council Stormwater Management bylaw that we need to put in place for the process that we've commenced last month and due to close on the 25th of February this month. So we need to have some councillors to sit on a hearing panel for that. Do you want to perhaps give us a little bit of an insight on what that involves, Mr. Chief Executive, from time-wise? I think is it one meeting?
Is it what, sorry?
Is it one meeting or two meetings?
Yes, Your Worship. Well, I assume it will be one meeting unless there are issues raised by submitters that require further research or consideration. As to how many submissions we get and how complex they may be in terms of issues raised, that's really indeterminate at this point in time. But I would be surprised if we were, again, excuse the pun, were deluged with lots of submissions.
Okay, so we need to appoint some councillors. Is anybody breaking the neck to be on this particular panel? Councillor McPhail looks eager at that point. Councillor McPhail, Councillor Grant, Nick Grant, and perhaps one more, Councillor Dixon. How would you feel about being on that one? Okay. Does anybody else really want to be on that? If not, with a recommendation, we'll read Councillor McPhail, Councillor Nick Grant and Councillor Dixon be appointed to the hearing panel. Thank you very much for your voluntary effort. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Councillor Davis, thank you. Do I have a second to Councillor Gardine? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Your Worship, could I just ask a supplementary question on that?
Yes.
That item, just in terms of the question to Matt, I guess, for you, is a question regarding the user group or the catchment group. How's that progressing, and where does that fit in during the lead up to the closing of the submissions?
Through Your Worship, My vision was that the user group would, I guess, implement the bylaw or look at ways of implementing the bylaw. The bylaw is, I guess, reasonably high level and I guess sets the standards that we want to meet, and it would be the user group that, I guess, works through the practicalities of exactly how they're met. So it would be after the bylaw is put in place, is sort of my
Yes, I
thinking on it.
guess the question would be, if there's going to be a user group, should they be coordinated pre the bylaw and make use of the information and the knowledge that they have? Is that what you're suggesting, Councillor Heisey? Yeah. Do you have any thoughts around that one, Matt?
Yeah, I guess potentially it could be. It will obviously delay the implementation of the bylaw, but potentially there's not an issue with that.
How many users are we talking about?
Yeah, I guess it depends how much interest there is, but I had envisaged it being sort of around that 4 to 6 to keep it rather, reasonably streamlined. I've had one formal expression of interest and another two that certainly they haven't expressed an interest to be on the working group, but they're certainly, I think.
So is that sort of group and that sort of process something that council could be involved in to implement?
Yeah, I would have thought so, yeah.
So, given that you raised the point, Councillor Heisted, would you be interested in making contact with those users and see where we can get to in terms of a view on the proposed bylaw?
Your Worship, I'm happy to be part of something, but I guess I see it as a staff's role to get the group together, and I think a couple of councillors should be involved. Quite difficult to lead that from a political point of view without staff support. So I guess happy to put my hand up and say, but I think we should, personally, I think let the submission process carry forward, but get on with it and show meaningful engagement with that group, and so they're up and running, ready to swing into action, because it's probably out of time now, I'd see, with the close date.
Okay, good point. So Councillor Hose's put his hand up and said he's prepared to be part of such a group. Is there any other councillors who would like to be part of that discussion?
Can they be on the panel?
Beg pardon?
Can they be on the panel? The same people?
Probably not. Would that? What's your view there?
Through your worship, yeah, they can be on the panel, because the panel only have powers of recommendation. So
Okay, righto.
if you wish, provided there's no conflicts of interest.
Okay, so you indicating an interest, Councillor Phillips? Okay. You're comfortable with that, both of you? Right. Council's comfortable with that?
Could we just put a time frame on it to assist the staff as to when the councillors would like there to be some?
I think it would have to be sooner rather than as soon as possible. We've got a fairly short time till the end of the submissions, haven't we?
Is it doable, I guess, for the team?
Through your worship, well, from my point of view, I see the working group or the process that we need to go through, and that could be quite a long period, but there's nothing stopping us getting that working group formed and having the first meeting and some initial discussions before the bylaw hearing submissions close. Yeah.
So you think that's possible and practical? Okay.
Yeah, I think so, yep.
Righto, let's work down that track. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Heisted, for raising that. Item 9, and we have a memo from the admin manager with regard to issuing of staff warrants and authorisations for various positions. Who's going to speak to this one? Yep.
Yeah, Thank you, Your Worship. It's just with any new change of staffing in the regulatory area, we need to have them fully warranted just in case there are issues that emerge, and they need to have the authority to act under the Local Government Act, and that authority is vested in the elected members of the council.
Okay, open for discussion. Any questions councillors might have with the process? Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Davis, thank you. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you. So it brings us on to item 10, fluoridation of drinking water supplies. And we have a memo here, from a report here from Three Waters Asset Manager, which is laying out the challenge we have due in part or in whole relating to the letter that's come from the Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield. So Matt, do you want to speak to this?
Through Your Worship, I don't think I have too much to add to the report. I guess it's something that's obviously been talked about for some time now, but if you haven't already, I'd certainly encourage you to have a look at the information that's on the Ministry of Health's website around fluoridation, because I certainly found that quite informative. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Matt. And this is not something that's hasn't been before this council before. It's been before this council on a number of times. However, it does seem to be taking a much more directed view now. Councillor Bolger?
While I'm aware of the benefits of fluoridation, I'm not comfortable with mandate from on high, and so I assume, and I know that you're keen to always have submissions from the public, that we go through some process. And I know that there'll be opposing views and they will be substantial. So I see this really quite a difficult direction to take, but it does seem clear that the Director General is pointing us and giving us a direction that way. I'm not comfortable with it. I can understand the reason for it.
Okay.
I'd like to hear other people's comments.
Thank you, Councillor Bolger. And as I said, this has been before this council over the last 20 or 30 years a number of times. And from my understanding, Gore at one point was fluoridated, but then chose to not be fluoridated. I guess I understand what you're saying, absolutely, and none of us like to be told what to do. There's no doubt about that. And we're seeing that on a daily basis, or almost on an hourly basis, with regarding to COVID. But what I am really concerned about, and I guess my leaning on this is on a pro stance, as I hear and I see the damage that's going on, particularly in our young people, but not just our young people's oral care, the whole community. We pride ourselves in the fact that we have access to the mobile surgical unit coming to Gore and doing some really good stuff. Over 80% of the time that they spend in Gore is all to do with bad oral health and fixing up the problems that have been created, particularly with children, but not just with children. So I hear exactly what you're saying. And I guess I'll refer to the Chief Executive just in terms of what direction, what direction we should go in terms of, if the suggestion Councillor Bolgers is saying is that we ask for submissions, what that might look like and what status would that have.
Shall I ask the question again?
Be careful.
Yes. I note the recommendation, intention to start considering issuing direction. So it's a slow process of maybe information rather than jumping knee deep into consultation. Would that be a more useful approach?
Look, I guess it depends on what your outcome is. What is desirable? From my perspective, having particularly children's oral health improve dramatically is the outcome that we should be considering and looking at as a council. Certainly we can make this go slow, but at the end of the day, I believe it'll be the community that suffer if we do that. Councillor, Mr. Chief Executive, do you want to make any comment?
I think, thank you, Worship. I think the notion of consultation, this won't be one of those. You see in Dr. Bloomfield's letter, he talks about direction. And this is as a direct result of the local government sector collectively saying, we don't want this hot potato. South Taranaki District Council, and at the time we thought, there for the grace of God go I, or us, were involved in a brutal judicial review over fluoridation. So South Taranaki District Council wanted to introduce fluoridation, and the anti-fluoridation brigade took that council to court under a judicial review application. I understand it took a couple of years, but there certainly there was six-figure sums spent on defending its actions, and that spawned a plea that can there be some type of central strategy to avoid individual councils being dragged into court. And you always knew that there was going to be a segment of the population that didn't want it and a segment of the population that did want it, and the local government view collectively that this was a health issue that needed to be actually owned and directed by the Ministry of Health, and that's now what we've got through this legislation.
Okay, so another question, one more.
Statement, really. Surely central government, if they want fluoridation as part of their Three Waters directive, they should include it rather than passing this hot potato to us. And I understand that there's a concern about oral health in young people and the ongoing costs and problems they'll produce. So I can see the merit in it.
Okay, open for discussion. Councillor Grant.
Just through you, Your Worship. Just for Matt, really, what is the kind of conditions of our piping through Gore? Have we got many metal pipes running through our water systems? I know houses are mainly made up of copper pipes, copper cylinders. From a plumbing point of view, the fluoridation is going to make me lots of money because it's going to eat copper, expose lead-based properties in tapware, and that therefore affecting people's health. So we've really got to look at that too, because if we start getting more sick people because of the deterioration of their tapware and their pipework, that's going to make us and put us in the firing line for those direct results. So from our point of view, what are our treatment plants like, and what are our water pipes like underneath? Is there anything going through galv or steel?
Through Your Worship, we have some galv water connections. Predominantly the reticulated mains are cast iron, asbestos or PVC or PE. So I'm not aware of any studies around the impact of fluoridation on council infrastructure and what effect that might have. It would certainly be interesting to know.
Especially after we spent so much money in East Gore.
Certainly the upgraded treatment plants, I wouldn't have too many concerns around the impact on them.
Yeah, but still a lot of properties in Gore with galvanised water mains, especially a lot of the older houses. And in Resthaven, I know that's got a big 4-inch galvanised steel main going in there. And a lot of that place is actually copper. A lot of it is copper. So they could be good at looking at good maintenance bills over the years. Pretty much just a statement. We're all worried about children's oral health. It's a big thing. But who's to say that those children are actually going to drink that water, and they haven't got poor diets and not drinking fizzies anyway? So are we actually going to change anything?
I guess look, I take the points you're making, Nick, and look, I wasn't aware of the impact that fluoride might have on the piping system. It's certainly news to me. And I just don't know how big an issue that would likely to be. I do know that if you compare the communities up and down the country that are fluoridated and the ones that aren't, the condition of the oral health is stark from the ones that aren't. And I know that this brings out the pros and the cons in terms of community, and we've been fluoridated in the past and then thrown it out. We've been asked a few times. We've had Tim Mackay, sort of a professor from Otago, come and speak to council. Some pretty compelling arguments, but council's decided not to because of the fear that we're telling people what to do. Personally, as I've said before, I think the health of the community comes first, and we should be doing all we can to ensure that rises rather than falls. This is just an opportunity for that, but I guess this is only just a step in the direction. Any other comment? Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Your Worship. I know I don't think we can dispute the benefits to young people, but also I do know that as we get older, if you've got poor oral health, that actually leads to a lot of other ongoing issues with the body as well. And we also have lots of additives to other things that we eat, like our bread, for instance, and our salt. So from that point of view, I just think, okay, if the Director of Health is pushing us in this direction, obviously our hands are tied anyway to a certain point, and I do understand also that at some point when the water enters your house, there is an opportunity to take the fluoride out. Stand to be corrected on that, but I think it can be. Yeah. So for those that perhaps felt quite strongly about it and they don't want to drink it, that may be an opportunity for them to do something else. But I just think we need to be open-minded about it, and I do know that many people in the community are anti, but general health benefits. So I'm in favour of it.
Okay, any other questions or comments around the table? Councillor McPhail, then Councillor Davis.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just really a commentary from myself in relation to the benefits. If we do have such a poor oral health record in the area, it would probably pay to show that, to actually show what our stats are and actually give some indication to the community of how poor we are. Because clearly in Dr. Bloomfield's direction, or as in his implementation of his plan, he's indicating that it's large population areas with extremely poor oral health. So I think for the benefit of the community, we need to have that stated, because we aren't a large population, but clearly if we have got low oral health, well, that's probably the selling point for him. The second thing is obviously the filters that people have brought up. And the third thing is you're going to do fluoridisation of all the bottled water in New Zealand as well, because I believe there's actually substantial sales and product on the market that generally a lot of people drink that, other than taking, as Councillor Grant said, tap water. Be an interesting question to throw out there. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Just another point, Your Worship, and backing up Councillor McPhail's comment, it would be interesting to see how Gore children and Matera children and Waikaka, etc., actually stack up in those numbers, if that's at all possible. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so, sorry, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering where we're at as far as the Capital Works funding goes. I see there's a small amount available through the government, but that's for councils that get in early. So is more information to come, or do we have that information yet? Because it's quite a substantial amount for Matera plant alone, and if you add the Gore plant on, that's $500,000, more or less.
Through Your Worship, I think that there'll be more information to come on that. While Dr. Bloomfield's considering issuing directions from mid-2022 onwards, I don't think the time frame will be super short in terms of getting everyone compliant with it. So I suspect there'll be a fair bit of time there to look at funding.
So it'll be council's intention to apply for that funding?
I would assume so, yeah, absolutely.
Based on, through your worship, based on past experiences with funding schemes of this type, I'd be very surprised if there wasn't a prioritisation given to deprivation index. So communities that are a lower socio-economic profile would probably get more priority for funding, in which case the likes of Matera, given that we've got a reasonably sized a gap to fund there, would likely score well if that's the approach the government takes, and that's certainly been the approach in a variety of schemes over the past probably 10 years, both in wastewater and other areas.
Okay, Councillor Gardine?
Yeah, I presume if we borrow the money, it would be paid over to Three Waters. The loan would be passed over. And has that been checked out? Or is it presumed that the council would wear that?
If any borrowing certainly would ultimately find its way to and transfer to the new Three Waters entity, yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, while I agree with the transfer of the funds, there's still a 2-year gap, roughly a 2-year gap before that would happen. So therefore the poorer ratepayer once again has to try and fork out another $250,000 to $500,000 extra for a mandate that some people don't even require. Now, to me, I think we should all move to China, the way things are going at the moment.
Well, that's a sweeping statement, Councillor Phillips. Didn't realise your desire to go to China. It was so great. Okay, we'll open it up for any further discussion. Councillor Dixon?
Thank you, Worship. What I'm wondering is, where is parents' responsibility in this? Because I know that a lot of people don't get their children to clean their teeth. They keep giving them fizzy drinks. If Mr. Bloomfield is so concerned about the health of the teeth, why does he not do something about people buying huge amounts of sugary drinks and feeding it to their children?
Yeah, look, I understand completely the point you're making. I'm not sure what could be done in that respect. I just simply don't know.
You know, I just wonder about the timing with COVID and all the regulations we've got, and then we're just going to pop this one in. And I think it's probably going to, like a bombshell. Yeah. And that's what I'm a bit afraid of. I'm not against it, but I think the timing's wrong.
So I guess there's been, I'm not sure who mentioned it, but somebody wanting to see some more data around what we look like as a community. I think that would be a good next step. Councillor McPhail, I think it was. I think that would be a good next step, and I'm pretty sure that data will be reasonably freely available, both locally and centrally. So, Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. So then, do we ask Matt then, as the Three Waters manager for the GDC, that he continues on with the aspect of having us mandated to have fluoridation in our 2 water plants, because it would be silly for us not to have Becca doing what the plans in Matera currently at the moment, and having the building set up for it if it is mandated. And that means then we have to go back and spend another sum of money to do it. Do we just currently say, okay, let's spend the extra 5,000 at the moment, just say for a figure, that we spend the money and say to Becca, right, put it in the plans for future use, or do we take the gamble and say no?
I guess that's why you're a councillor. Councillor Phillips, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think at this stage, given the overall general sense of unease in the community about how the community is responding to COVID, you've got a statement of intent, and that's all you've got from the government. The legislation's passed, but we don't have a surefire knowledge of timing I would urge just a little bit of a conservative approach. No, it may come. The government is moving, but whether it will have a demand on a whole host of communities within strict deadlines, I personally doubt it. But if it does, we deal with it. At this stage, the information is for you to note and to be aware that this may come. But you'd be better off, I would have thought, of responding to a government directive rather than jumping in and saying, we think it might happen, and we're going to stimulate the debate and do the job now, where, as some councillors have said, the timing isn't perhaps flash. So my strong advice is to adopt a watching brief, and this legislation was passed to take the pressure and the heat from local government. Use that and let the directive fall at your lap when it will, and then we'll deal with it.
Look, I totally agree with your comments around timing. I think it would be good for this council to have access to the data that we can access locally, though. So just so we know what the current situation is. Councillor Bolger?
Comfortable with the Chief Executive and your own point of view that we wait for a firm directive, and because the recommendation states that the information received, I'll move the recommendation.
So you're moving just received?
Yes, that is received.
Yeah, okay. So do you want to see further data?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the report be received and that we source relevant data to this area from the Health Department and from local sources. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, do we have a seconder? Sorry. So actually, Councillor McDonnell seconded that. Matt?
Yeah, sorry, I'll just add to that discussion. My intention is, and I'm happy to change it if the council desires, but my intention is to ask Becca to design the treatment plant upgrade at Matera to incorporate fluoridation in the future, so that if we do get that direction, we can easily upgrade.
Look, it makes sense to do that, I think. Yeah. Okay, good discussion, and it's interesting to note that over the years the arguments haven't really changed, or the attitudes haven't changed, both for and against. Right, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you. We have minutes of the Matera Community Board to be received and recommendations ratified. Somebody like to move those? I move. Councillor Grant. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Phillips. Thank you. Any discussion or question? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment about the bridge, with the kids jumping off the bridge, and I see you've been involved in that, Councillor Phillips. Is it worth going through the schools and having the schools visit the site and maybe talk some of the younger kids through that, the danger of it?
So there's actually been quite a lot of effort gone in over the last 6 or 8 weeks, since, I'm not sure when that meeting was. Look, I think, personally, I think the children know the dangers, absolutely. There does seem to be a challenge there, though, for them. But Councillor Phillips, do you want to make any comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, there's nothing much I can add to what you've already said. There has been a lot of work going on in the background from the principal of the school as well as our community connector. And there was a lot of discussion held on that night of the meeting. I think it's been a passage of right for children ever since we can remember, basically. The only concern that we have is crossing over the arches and then crossing over the centre arch to the next arch on the other side to jump over the other way, and the mess it could make on the road as they fall off. But that's the main concern, really. we've talked about signage, and the roading manager was asked to instigate that, so that's about all we can do.
Okay. Yeah, so councillors may or may not be aware that a community connector, which is a government-funded position, has been appointed into Matera and doing some really good stuff, I'd have to say. She's been very proactive in engaging the whole community in this particular challenge, and particularly the marae have been very active there. So, look, Councillor Reid's right, and Councillor Phillips is right. This has been going on for decades. It's unlikely to stop now, and but we do need to make sure that people are aware of the dangers they're putting themselves in.
Sorry, could I just ask another question about that report? And I just note too that the community connector saying that basketball was very popular, and I know it is even in Gore here. And I was just wondering, is there any opportunity for Parks and Reserves maybe to look at installing extra hoops at Queen's Park? And even in Gore, a lot of the young ones out at the marae or out at the Rananga, they play out there, but there's really nowhere in town for them with proper basketball hoops.
Do you want to make a comment to that one, Neville, just with regard to the Matera Community Board?
Your Worship, I think I'll just pass this one to Keith, because we've had several discussions within Matera what's required, what's happening, and he can let you know.
Yeah, just following on, in Matara, we have reinstated a backboard at Tullock Park, and it was marked out last week for half-court basketball, which is essentially the game that everybody wants to play. And yeah, we've had a similar request from East Gore, and I think in our budget, as part of the Swan Street playground development, we had another unit going in there. So yeah, so I think we are trying to cover that base off really, and it I guess it meets a group of teenage kids that otherwise would be possibly involved in other business, undesirable stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for being so proactive.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Phillips?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I can only just say to the Keith, his proactiveness is been noted in the last few months in Matera, and it's a huge thank you to not only him but to Gail as well. And the children in Matera really enjoyed the summer, even though they were jumping off the Matera Bridge, which is a bit of a disappointment. And next priority, of course, is Matera is to get our water park constructed in our second stage of Tullock Park, and a few other things that are coming up.
Okay, so we have a report that is moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? The motion is carried. So it brings us on to item 12, which is the emergency committee that was established prior to the Christmas holiday period. The committee didn't need to meet at any point, so the recommendation is that the information be received and Council Emergency Committee be disbanded. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Councillor Reid, do I have a seconder? Councillor Bolger, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. That brings us to the end of the open session of the council meeting, and